Hello friends, welcome back to my studio. I hope you're well. So today's video, as the title says, is about making your own cold wax medium. I got to this point because when I started varnishing these and putting the cold wax medium on, I realized very quickly I was going to run out of my little tub of cold wax medium. This is 118 ml and it was $18. I went and I think I said in the last video I was going off to buy a big tub of this. I found a tub that was about 400, maybe nearly 500 ml, and it was over $40, nearly $50. And I thought, gee, and I'm going to tear through that because it wasn't that big a tub. It was only like maybe that tub, and I know you can get it in a big 4-litre tub, and I could only imagine how much that is. It's absolute quality. Gamsolin's a great product. It's absolute quality, and you will pay for quality fine art, archival art supplies. But I had a look and realised that this cold wax medium is made up of things I already had in the studio that I had been playing around with encaustic wax with. Cold wax medium is definitely a cold, used cold, very different to encaustic medium that is used melted and fused and then set solid. They do have similar products in them. So they have this beeswax. This is a granular, little, like a chopped chip. They're little chips. Show you. Little granules. Oh, they're all stuck to me. Oh, don't know why I did it like that. So, bleached beeswax. Of course, if you're using unbleached beeswax, it will colour your medium and it will then colour your artwork. So, bleached beeswax, and it has Damar Resin. It is a tree resin, and it's completely different to the Damar varnish in the fact that this is liquid form. It's Damar resin but in a liquid form as varnish, and this is it still in its crystallized form or rock form, solid resin. So it has that in it, and so the encaustic medium just has those two things, but the cold wax medium also has a solvent. The recipe I found comes from this book here. This is the absolute Bible for cold wax medium, and so I'm going and using their recipe first, and then I will adjust it according to how it feels to me and what I might be doing different as I mix it, and the consistency I like. Because what's really great about making your own, you can change the consistency of it. So I can add more wax if I want it a firmer mix, or I can add more solvent if I want a looser wax medium. The recipe in that book says to use Gamsol, and this is the equivalent in the language range. And I got this because it is the lowest toxic solvent on the market. 75 stands for 75 degrees at which it will likely to self-combust. So that's obviously quite a high temperature. I wouldn't likely have that getting to that sitting in the studio. So it's safe heat-wise. There's certainly in history a lot of studios that have burnt down because of terps on rags and them getting hot in the bin, or how they've been stored with not enough air around them and self-combusting, and next thing the whole studio's gone. Happened to a friend of mine, his father's studio burnt down for that exact reason. So I wanted to have something that was as safe as I could, because I've really been wanting to get back into my oil paints, and it's the toxicity of it that has really stopped me. Discovering this cold wax medium, I think it's going to be a way that I can really get stuck into my oil paints again, and I'm really thrilled. So the quantities for this, I'm taking it again out of this book, and I will put it in the description, but you need 11 ounces of beeswax, and I'm lucky enough these studio scales do have an ounce setting on them. If you need grams, I think it's the equivalent is about 300 grams, but you would need to double check me on that. So 11 ounces of beeswax, conveniently 11 ounces of the solvent, so a 1-to-1 ratio of solvent and wax, and 1 ounce of the Damar resin. The Damar resin in it gives the wax a little bit more firmness, a little bit more archival hardness to the final product, and this is basically what the Gamsol cold wax medium has in it. So let's turn the camera around and get mixing in our cauldron. Here we are with the electric fry pan on a low heat, and here's our beeswax granules. We're going to put about half of those in. And when they're melted, we will put the Damar resin in. So I can't tell you how hot exactly to have your heat source, because you all have different heat sources, of course. And you also want to make sure your pan is completely clean, because that will be picked up in the mix. Of course, beeswax in blocks will take a lot longer to break down. You can break them up with a hammer or grate them. So there we go, that's nice and melted. So now we go in with our Damar resin. For those of you who haven't used Damar resin before, it's very sticky as it's melting. And I'm just, because it's from a tree, it does have bits of bark and bugs and things in it. And same thing, like that great big piece there, it's a bit of bark. That will be in your medium at the finish. So you can strain it out, but it's also easy once it separates from the resin. It's pretty easy to fish, particularly the bigger pieces out. If you heat this Damar resin on too high a heat, it will give off fumes, and it's not the best, of course, to breathe in the fumes. So you want it warm enough that you're getting a melt, but not too much that you're getting fumes off this. The reason why you put your wax in first is that the wax helps support the Damar resin, stops it sticking and burning. Oops, that went straight back in. So you can see how it gets kind of gloopy. It's a bit sticky like honey because it's a resin. So don't be tempted to turn your heat up, just let it do its thing. So I might just speed the video up a bit because this is not very exciting until this Damar is all melted in. Right, that's all melted in, and this bit here is mostly bark and bits of tree and beetle and whatever else. So I'll give up that little bit of resin to be able to pull out all of that muck, because I don't want any of that debris in cold wax medium. So that's all melted, so we go in with the rest of our beeswax. I do love the smell. The beeswax is so beautiful, such a lovely sweet smell. So just run your spatula along the bottom of your pan. The Damar resin can stick to the bottom, so you just want to make sure you've got all of that well melted and amalgamated. And there's our mix, and it's looking pretty clear of debris actually, so that's super exciting. Okay, so heat off. We're going to pour in our solvent, or Gamsol if you're using Gamsol. You want to be stirring all the time. You can see these little crystals are forming. That will all dissolve. I think this is unique to this mix. The Gamsol won't crystallise like this that I know of, but I haven't done it myself with Gamsol. Let's put it all in. It will look cloudy before it's ready. You want to get all this mixed in before it cools too much. You might want to use a thicker spatula than what I've got going here. It's a forgiving mix. If this isn't mixed in well enough, you can remelt it and have another go at mixing it in. I can see the little snowflakey type crystals in there. I know I need to keep stirring. And of course the wax is starting to cool on the stick here too. So just wipe down your sides and your spatula. Keep it melted. Will also depend on the size pot you're making this in as to how quickly it cools. I've obviously got a very broad surface area here. If you find that it's solidifying too quickly, just sneak a little bit of heat back in. You don't want to be heating it too much, but it will take enough heat to remelt the wax. If it's solidified that much, it will take enough heat to make it liquid again. You certainly don't want it to be simmering or gassing off at all, even though I'm told this one is the least toxic of all the solvents. It has a very high heating temperature because it is flammable. All this stuff's flammable, so you need to be mindful of where you're going to make this and how you dispose of any rags that have the cold wax medium on it. So you see it's got this cloudy nature to the liquid still. I can see the bottom of the pan, but it's still got a cloudy look to it. Great, I think that's all the solvent now well incorporated. Not only is these ingredients flammable, they're also, even though this is low toxic, it's still worth being in a well ventilated space. You can put a fan on, drawing the fumes away from you out of a window or a door. You can also wear a mask, because part of the reason why these aren't toxic is the smell, the odour is taken out, which can be a little unsafe because you can't smell the fumes. So please be in a well ventilated space. That's good. There's hardly any debris in there at all. Great. So we'll let this cool and we'll come back and show you what it looks like when it's all solidified. Here is what the mix looks like when it's cool. There's still just a little bit of warmth there. And what you're looking for is your tool to go very easily into the mixture. And it does. And that's it there. So it's a bit like shortening, consistency of shortening. Now I'll clean this off completely. And I'll show you the comparison to the Gamlin. So this mix has got a little bit more colour to it than the Gamlin. Just pop that lid on because of the solvent. So as you can see, there's a little bit more colour here to the homemade, to the Gamlin product. It looks, because of that, it looks a little stiffer, but it's actually very easy to work. And it's giving me the same sort of resistance as I work the palette knife in. So I would say that recipe is pretty spot on. That colour's come up a little bit in that as I've worked it. What's going to be interesting now is to see is how much of this white shows up in the artwork compared to that. Let's mix a little bit of oil paint into these to see a comparison. So this is Brilliant Magenta in the Langridge range of oil paint. Let's put a little bit out. And I'll try and use the same amount, give or take, and then the same amount Now this cold wax medium can be mixed to any ratio you like, and the oil paint will still be fine in it, and you don't have to worry about the whole fat over lean. This will just work beautifully apparently. Clean this off. So there's our Gamsol with the oil paint. This is a little bit stiffer with the oil paint in it. Let's pick up a bit of this. So if anything, the homemade one has got slightly darker tone if I was being picky. There you go. Fantastic. I actually like it knocking the edge off that brightness. I mean, I'm going to choose this anyway because it was much cheaper to make and have in the studio, but that works fine. Now, you can play around with this. As I said, if you wanted this more thin, you can remelt your whole batch and add some more solvent in. And if you wanted it firmer, perhaps you wanted to work more impasto with more texture, you can add more wax to that mix. Yeah, you get the luxury of playing around with how the consistency that you like to work with. But you can also buy the product straight off the shelf if you can't be going along and making your own. I'm going to leave these to dry. You'll see it in a follow-up. I'll just bring that wax back into play. I'm going to decant it into these glass jars that I've saved. I do hope you found that useful. It will be an opportunity for you to have these really great products in your studio at an affordable price. Let me know in the comments how you go. I always love chatting to you and hearing how you're getting on. And paint, create whatever it is that you like to create. Get out there, live a creative life, have fun. See you next week. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Bye.